Sahanavantu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahi Tejasvinanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. So there is a question before us in terms of karma.
Apart from karma.
Apart from karma, right?
Do we experience challenge or pain, emotional, physical pain, for the purposes of growth?
Purposes of growth, all right. You see, when you discuss these terms, we have to understand what does it mean by karma and what do we mean by growth. So karma, we have to understand, comes from the root kr, which means to act, and everything associated with it. So when you act, there's always a consequence. And there's always a reason for acting. There's something behind it. And then there's an effect about it. And the causal law will tell us that it is like a wave system. Let's say the ocean, where you have a peak in the wave, is caused by a hollow, and where the peak causes another hollow, the hollow causes another wave. So it goes on. So there's a cyclical aspect to it, not a linear aspect to it. When we talk of growth, we suspect there's a linear aspect to it. So action and its consequences and growth look to be different things. But actually it's the same thing. In order to grow, action is required. And the conscious action is required. So on Sunday, I put it in this way. Let us suppose that we have a garden available to us with two sections. And one section is to do with our normal perceptions. What we see in the familiar world can be specifically registered by us and revalued. It means there are normal things that we take in the world. If they're so familiar to us, we take them for granted. We assume that they should be there, and we get on with it. We don't notice anything. It takes a particular type of how a leaf can be in a certain way. Or even when you're by yourself, how the diaphragm can move up and down and produce some breathing, and all the circumstances surrounding it. Air must be available. Oxygen must be available, along with other gases, nitrogen and so on. And then what is the arrangement? A flower also has to act, because a plant has a wonderful secret, photosynthesis. When the photons hit the leaf, then there are a series of activities, and what results there is, in the photosynthesis, is that there are excitons, is the technical term for it, which have to go and look for a center that produces all the rest. That, in other words, produces all the carbohydrates available, that produces life as we know it, and ultimately that gives off the oxygen, leaves the carbon behind. Now we know that there's a peculiar subtle thing which is unseen. Because if you go to search for that center randomly, you won't find it. It's just as if you had a big ball in a forest and you blindfold, and now your mission is to go and look for it. And the time taken will be enormous. So there's something that issues waves of possibility that go out. That's now. So all of these are worthy of contemplation. It's not as simple as just seeing, just taking for granted that the diaphragm moves up and down, we breathe. If we really, really understand it with a certain level of connectedness, then we will see so many intricate and complex things are necessary to make that thing happen. but it happens by itself spontaneously. Is this karma? Yes, because it's activity. It's just unconscious karma. Then the other side of it is memory, because all those impressions get into a deposit area called memory. And we can draw from memory and combine the memory with our perceptions and make a nice garland of flowers. We can make different combinations. Like when you worship at a shrine, maybe having the same flowers, you combine and recombine to make it fresh every day. So we have the capacity to do that. This too is karma. Now, growth implies growth in a certain direction. And let's say that the growth for us would be in a positive direction. Because what we call growth really is evolution. What does that mean? Unfolding. Our nature is there. It is already pure and perfect according to the Vedanta. And what has to happen is it has to express itself. Can we evolve beyond man? Yes, God. But that was what was there in the beginning. And on Sunday, I used this example of a river originating there, say in a mountain region. Let's say the great Ganga starts off with melted snow. Melted snow looks like a dead thing. But as the temperature changes, it evolves. What does it do? It doesn't change, only in form. And also, we call the area we call stream. Then as it evolves, we call it river. Then as it evolves, we call it, a vast flowing river, until ultimately it may be 1 kilometer wide. And ultimately that goes into the sea. Sea, river, stream, snow, are these all different? No, they're all the same. So when we talk of growth, we're talking of some inward movement, blooming. When we construct any garland of flowers, we have to sacrifice the flower that was situated comfortably on a bush. We pick it, and the bush loses the flower, but the eye gains it. Does it require flowers? No. Do we are offering flowers to the Lord? Yes. Why? Because these perishable things called flowers, an expression of what we cannot normally express. Such inward beauty and bliss, such thankfulness. This is a key to adoration and worship. We give it. So we could also say that this kind of activity is the technical term for it is yajna. Yajna, something that is sacrificed, something that is offered. And an offering requires some sacrifice on the one side, some gain on the other. So it goes on. So that leads us to our subject. But apart from karma, I don't know if there's anything apart from karma. So that activity can be bifurcated into different areas. The kind of activity which is unconscious. Digestion of food is an activity. It's unconscious. We don't think about it. Some of these unconscious activities we can bring up to a conscious level, be aware of them and appreciative of them. And a sense of thankfulness is there. And what does that do? That allows the mind to grow. It allows the mind to grow into an area beyond the mundane borders, into an intricate area where we honor and contact the source of things. And as we go on and progress, as it were, more and more, as we grow, as it were, more and more, we realize it's not a linear progression, it's an expression. So growth means expression with some subtle formula inside that drives it forward. If we apply karma to it, that is, karma yoga to it, that is, if we make activities along the lines of yajna, then we enhance this expression, which we can call growth. or evolution. Evolution is just your own nature trying and struggling to express itself. Just as water wants to express itself, but there are obstacles, boundaries, difficulties in the way. We can't really say that these difficulties are for our growth. Despite the difficulties, we grow. So we have the capacity to see all these difficulties, as it were. We categorize them as difficulties until we find a way around them and see the possibility of circumventing them. Then they are no longer difficulties. Obstacles may be, but they're playful obstacles. So if you are traveling on a road full of thorns, don't sit and complain. I want to unite with the depth of my own being, the ocean, what we call Brahman, that supreme principle that is in fact everything, that has some totality. I want to unite with that. But what's in the way? Rocks are in the way. Bends are in the way. In some cases, a dam is in the way. But water has this capacity to find its way around and take the easy route. Supposing you have, and we used to, I think every child must have, and you say, oh, shore that up, shore that up. Shore that up, shore that up. At the end of the last, all gone. Or you try and build a small castle with sand on the ocean's shore. Gone. Or you try and build a small castle with sand on the ocean's shore. Spend a lot of time. Make sure that the sand is soft enough so it keeps its shape. Fine. But what happens as you're doing this? The tide is coming in. It's starting to wash away and erode the sandcastle bit by bit, bit by bit. No matter how much you protest, you won't be able to save it because the ocean is stronger and wipes away the sandcastle. Nothing we can do about it. So what we call nature is a kind of mother that gives us, in a sense, all these various opportunities for us to use our ingenuity and imagination to find a way around. And then when another obstacle is there, find another way around. Find another way around. Another way around. It requires patience. It requires mind. See, all these things it requires. There are many people who give up. I gave a retreat, the joy of sadhana. I mentioned there in Germany. Why do people not sustain their spiritual practice? Give up. Only a small select few have enough persistence, have enough purity, see, have enough of these qualities to drive it through. And then they realize the work is only like driving a stone up or a big ball up a hill. If you study how beetles do it, you see, dung beetles spend a lot of time gathering this huge ball of dung and pushing it along, pushing along. Imagine. But you see, if they were to push it along to the top of a hill and they want to go beyond that, all they have to do is leave it. It'll flow down by itself, effortlessly. So Mother Nature has a way of saying, please, take advantage of painful things. Now we're studying the Bhagavad Gita. So you see, this question arises spontaneously. Your question is a valid question and it arises spontaneously here in the Bhagavad Gita. Because the most difficult circumstances there, Arjuna, or his mental state is in turmoil. And the whole chapter is Vishada Yoga, yoga of despondency, depression. Well, somebody comes to me and says, Swami, what a difficulty, I'm so depressed. What's my reply? Blessed are you. You started your journey, but don't leave it there. Continue. Don't run away from any circumstance like that. Don't yield to it. but confront it in a different way, in a way that revalues the circumstance away from what we consider to be normal, and we find the truth and reality about it. All these struggles, all of these difficulties, all of these painful circumstances, which may or may not be brought on by ourselves from our own action and our consequence of it, the effects of our own action, are all to do, in a sense, with growth. Because they all enable us to become stronger and to discover the truth within and to find a formula that circumvents and overcomes pain. So pain is a big subject in Eastern philosophy. And Buddhism makes it the central theme, that seeing such pain, such difficulties, categorized as sickness, categorized as old age, characterized as death and bereavement, characterized as, all of these kinds of things, physical disease and suffering and so on, everywhere present. Old age. Old age need not be a suffering. Old age may be a delight, but you have to be sensible and take good precautions about it. So all of these indicate one thing. There is a way around it. What is the cause of these things? Desire. That's according to Buddhism. Second noble truth. There is a cause of it. Then there's what is the cause? Desire. And then fourthly, there is a way out. What is the way out? The way out is by a true vision of what things are that require discernment. When we say jnana yoga, as comprising of viveka principally and vairagya, well, it's not the exclusive path, because everybody needs to have that reevaluation of things. And using the capacity for the imagination and art, we can do it much more easily. We can take our garden of normal perceptions on the one side, memories on the other, combine them and construct a beautiful garland of flowers. And offer that nicely, so that when any of these things in life come up, we have a beautiful garden and we have a beautiful garland that we can construct in the background, in reserve for such instances. Somebody who knows the art of doing this will confidently and delightfully overcome every so-called vicissitude. They will have a sense of adventure that makes them get around this. They will take the greatest difficulties, the greatest pains, the greatest bereavements, and transform them into something more delightful. So there's that story that I often tell, and that you know backwards by now, but I'll tell it anyway. You see, there was a farmer who had to go and get his water from a river, and he had to go through his neighbor's field. Now his neighbor had a little bit of a malicious sense of humor, and every time the farmer with his empty bucket went to go and collect the water, his neighbor knew the time of day and in anticipation waited in ambush. It was a varied thing. So the ambush might be that he hid behind a rock. Sometimes he'd hide up a tree, sometimes behind a wall, but always armed with a bucket of cow dung. And at the appropriate moment, he would throw it over the farmer. Every day. And the ingenuity of the neighbor was such, the farmer never knew when this ambush would take place or where it would take place. Oh, he gets a fright. It's the farmer. He gingerly opens the door, and the farmer standing there with a rose flower in his hand, the most exquisite rose. Even as the door opens, he can smell the fragrance. Gingerly he says, well, we'll make him Irish. Are you all right there? It means, can I help you? I never understood why the Irish put it that way. But no, when I first came to Ireland, they said, are you all right there? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. Anyhow, so then the farmer presents the rose and says, I want to offer you this because after a year, all this cow dung that you gave me, I managed to collect. Now I planted a rose garden. In fact, not only did I cultivate this rose garden, but I'm doing flower export now. And please, here's the flower, but I'm giving it to you on one condition. He withholds the flower slightly. What is that? The neighbor says. Then he puts the flower a little further forward and said, this year, please, this forthcoming year, 2019, won't you double your quota? So with all the so-called crud of life, with all the so-called negative mud of life that most people think is mud, we can take it as some useful compost in which something useful can grow. And life is like that. And nature knows how to use it. You take any compost heap, there'll be seeds in it. And if you just leave it like that, you'll find tomato plants growing there. You might find flowers growing there, rose itself grow there. Because inside a rose is its own special formula. It doesn't agree with the formula that the compost uses. The compost has all the ingredients for that growth. So all these experiences of life are all useful in our growth, is the short answer. And is there any distinction between these vicissitudes? And karma creates the scenes. Karma creates all the good and bad effects that we find. Whatever scene we have in front of us, be it a variety of people, be it different situations that arise, or be it different places, all arise really from a maneuver inside us, because it is structured in such a way that the forces that operate the inward movement also operate the outward movement. So when a person says, well, I want something, something mundane, can you help me please pass a degree? It's worthwhile thinking, visualizing in the past tense. Already granted. We discussed that. Already gone. Thank you, Lord, for granting it already in the past. Finished. Then when it happens, oh, thank you, Swami. And secretly, I'll say, no worries, all the Lord's grace. But secretly, I'll know the technique and teach the technique. Already accomplished. He's walking along, found this wasted. And the story goes, he cursed it. It was barren and withered. And people around marveled at this thing. And he said, greater things than this can you accomplish. If you say to this mountain, move from there, it will move. Then he gives a formula. Believe that it is already accomplished. Put it in the past tense. Already accomplished, finished. Nothing more. So nature works on these basic principles. We just have to understand the various formulas that she uses. And so this, to some extent, is a reiteration of what we discussed on Sunday morning. Now, last week, we had this beautiful passage, oft quoted. Karmanya karmasyani cha sa bhutiman manusyeshu sa yukta kritsna karma. He who sees karmani, inaction, and action in inaction, he is wise among people. He is a yogi and he is accomplisher of everything. All action belongs to nature, but typically we don't register it in this way. I did this, I did that, I walked in, I walked out, I organized this, or something else. See? Well, you did really nothing. Oh, you must be tired. You drove to Belfast. No, I sat there. The car should be tired. Ask the car if it wants a drink. But I take ownership of it. This is called prophet-actor complex. When I think I am acting, when I think I am doing, at the deepest level, I am doing nothing. Nature is doing everything. But you can turn it around. It looks as if I'm doing. Why? Because what we call this world in front of us, the world, the small sphere in which we operate, is a mixture. It's a mixture of this divines at this local individual level. It looks as if there is a deep sense of self that is always registered as existent. I never ever came across somebody who said, I don't exist. Everybody says I exist. They might not blurt it out in general conversation. Good morning, how are you? Fine, I exist. They wouldn't say it like that. But there's always this understanding. I exist. There's a continuity that is called I, and we register it as existent. We do not think that I am a mirage, and we take life very seriously, and we orientate everything around ourselves. But the difficulty is this existent self is flaky, temporarily existent on the physical level, temporarily existent on the mental level. This combination of psychophysical entity is ephemeral, impermanent, transient, not lasting. But because we have a deep sense of self-existence, we superimpose that on the superficial I. That superficial I in psychology is called ego. Yogic psychology calls it ahamkara, sense of I, a sense of ownership, a sense that I'm doing everything. But a very quick analysis will understand, no, there are three evolutionary forces at play, what we call gunas, and these are playing. And when we take it, what are these and what is the operation? The operation is that of a wave system. And like all wave systems, they come and they go. What we call the body seems solid enough. But when we look at it in a different way, we find it is just a wave system. And when we look at all the qualities around it, what do we find? We find there are other wave systems, sound waves, heat waves, light waves, all working within fields, all pulsing. We used to think that space is empty. There's a formula called, Einstein-de Sitter model of the universe. And what that means is that, yes, light will travel in a straight line, but there's this assumption, there's a vacuum, there's nothing in between things. We think of things as points, as corpuscles. But when we look at it in a different way, we know that things are more like waves. Are they waves? Are they particles? Well, there's the old scientific argument from universities and so on, where from, Monday to Wednesday, you have the corpuscular theory. And from Thursday to Saturday, you have the wave theory. And on Sundays, you have both. You don't make any commitment because it's a day of rest. You don't even think about it. So we superimpose action on inaction. Just as we make this confusion, sitting in a train, another train beside us moving, we have the sensation, I'm moving. You're not. Or a child sitting, I mentioned this last week, sitting and watching the moon. That moon is moving. Where is it going? A child will ask, Daddy, where is the moon going? No, it's the cloud moving in front. No, 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 I can clearly see the moon is moving. No, the cloud in front is doing it. You have no idea how fast you're moving. You're spinning around on the earth. The earth is spinning around the sun. The whole solar system is moving gradually around the galaxy, gradually at very fast. And we have no idea about it because we sit here thinking we are stationary. This is part of a kind of illusion. So he who sees inaction, that is, in this language, Purusha, the indwelling entity, and he in Prakriti, the thing which is moving, and Prakriti, action in Purusha. If you notice these things, you become wise among men. And you are a yogi who does this because you have accomplished this sense of discernment. And when you realize this trick, then you have everything. That's the purport of it. So it's easy for a man on the shore. You may think nothing is moving at all. So the characteristics of one becomes imposed on the other due to our one problem, ignorance. We don't know any better. It looks like that and we accept it. So mistaking the non-self for the self, if you want a definition of what is egoism, that is it. Mistaking the non-self for the self and saying, I am so-and-so. This is my family. This is my bank account. This is my country. And look at how an exaggeration of that will cause war and bloodshed. This is my territory. This is my Palestine. This is my Israel. We should extend it properly and say, this is my planet. And let's look after it. And so there are different positions on this. Various commentators have mentioned this, so we can summarize it. So first of all, Shankaracharya's position is like this. Now I work, now I rest. Thus does he transpose the function of Prakriti on Atman, self. Mistaking the non-self for the self is egoism. There is agency in the egoistic man. And while his body works incessantly, the self remains as a witness, not moving anywhere. Atman is no wise entangled in karma, in action. You cannot say that that acts. The sense of overwork, underwork, or neglect of duty is not in the knower of the self. And this supreme position is recognized as inaction in action. Only they who have attained self-knowledge and they who are on the right path to self-knowledge can be in this benign state. Now Ramanuja puts it in a different way. See, activities taking place in supreme as akarma or inaction. Knowledge of the supreme, inaction. Then a commentary on it. A man earnestly takes to cookery. He occupies himself with cooking. This results in his acquiring knowledge of cookery. Seeing inaction in action is the process of adding to one's knowledge by doing one's duty properly. The emphasis. This way, karma enriches knowledge, and knowledge brings in proficiency in work. So karma, known as living a righteous life, culminates in self-knowledge. They're putting it as a person deliberately acting. Shankaracharya puts it as there is a witness and nature's doing it. Ramanuja takes this point of view that if you want to act, act in a righteous way. No contradiction. Just different positions. And karma and jnana are complementary to each other, not separate things. Sri Madhva explains it from a more dualistic point of view. What the individual soul views as his personal effort is karma, action. The unfailing cosmic function of the Supreme Lord is inaction, akarma. Man in his ignorance thinks that he is the sole agent of his action, but when he sets aside his egoism and agency and feels that his actions are in reality the doings of the Lord, it's the Lord that's doing it. You're taking credit for something that you're not responsible for. The Lord provides the sunshine. The Lord provides the arrangement of photosynthesis that gives you carbohydrates to munch and crunch on and gives you free oxygen to breathe. We can't take any ownership for it. We're all running on borrowed energy. Each one breathes separately. Each one replicates separately. Each one gets nourished separately, and each one expels waste material separately. Each one throbs separately. It's only that cells decided, as it were, to organize themselves into a unit. With God there, the Lord Supreme, organizing it this way. And so, man is not responsible for what he does in dream. But whatever takes place in that state is also the Lord's doing. With or without the instrumentality of man, the Lord's work goes on perfectly. He who knows this great fact sees the Lord's action in man's inaction too. Such a person gains in wisdom. And so we have various commentaries from various people. Siddhara would be one, and so on. But we now quote maybe from Vivekananda on it. Mind requires to be cultivated both in society and in solitude. And if the mind can maintain its equilibrium and calmness while being engaged in a roaring battle, it is seeing inaction in action. While one is bodily detached from the turmoils of the world and placed in a far-off deep mountain cave, if one's mind goes Godward steadily and earnestly, it is seeing action in inaction. It will not do for the mind to be lopsided in its development. There are those who are habituated to solitude. If such people be dragged into the tumultuous society, they go mad. There are others immersed in the throngs of the world. A day of solitary confinement is enough to turn them insane. Both of these types of people are partially trained. The perfectly trained alone are at their best, both in solitude and in society. They are turned both to action and inaction. Holding fast to a pillar spins speedily round without the fear of falling down. Similarly, you fix your mind on God and do the earthly duties as best you can. So this is the secret of self. Now a question arises, of course, and the next stanza will deal with it. Does the action when we no longer have to perform any actions? Well, what is the purpose of any action whatsoever? We linked it to growth, but where does growth lead you? It leads you to freedom. Freedom is the goal in Vedanta. Heaven is not the goal, freedom is the goal. Freedom from what? Freedom from any constraint you can think of. Physical constraints, psychological constraints, emotional constraints, pain constraints, painful situations, complete and total freedom, which also indicates a sense of command and control. Yanagni dakaranam tamahu panditam buddhaha. Yasya, whose undertakings, samara maha, whose doings are all devoid of design and desire for results, and whose actions are all burnt up by the fire of knowledge. Him, the sages call the wise. The wise people call these people wise also. What is the definition of wisdom or a wise person? A person who is devoid of design, planning, and desire for results. We just pause there and contemplate that a little bit. So you see, to plan and in order to fulfill desires is much, much better than sitting and doing nothing, inaction in that sense. But higher than that is to give up all that planning and all that design and all that desire that goes with it for a result. On what basis? And whose actions are all burnt up by the fire of knowledge. A person who has complete knowledge will know there's complete fulfillment. Desire becomes irrelevant. It goes away by itself. I have everything I want. You see that story of the Jain maybe, or the yogi in Alexander the Great comes. We don't know if it's valid, but the story is popular. Alexander the Great comes to conquer northwestern India. And there in the cold of the Himalayan mountains, he pauses and he sees a naked person contemplating the sunset. Being a great man, they call him Alexander the Great, he generously sends somebody with a cloak, put this cloak around this man. And then the soldier comes back. This man refused it. He said, no thanks. He said, I'm richer than your king. So Alexander the Great, no longer so great now, thinks, oh my goodness, how dare, the impudence. So he himself goes up to the man. You say you're richer than me, yet you're sitting here naked, watching the sunset and so on, but you don't feel the cold. I gave you this cloak out of compassion for you. Won't you take it? How can you say you're richer than me? You have nothing. So his reply was like this. You came to this region in order to get something. That means you had a lack of something and you need to get it from here. But me, I don't need anything. And now, if you would excuse me, kindly step aside. I'm trying to enjoy the sunset. So that's the story goes, and many versions of us. Fullness you can't add to, you can't take away from. Fullness is fullness. Then what more would you require? But that only comes with knowledge. What is knowledge? Knowledge is identifying with the knower. How to know God? When will I know God? When you your name is something, when you become that person, when you know you are that person, when you know you are God, becoming enters into being, and there's a static sense of poise and fulfillment and total perfection everywhere. So Sri Ramakrishna may put it like this: my cosmic mother, that is the ideal, the mother not only governing nature, but acting as nature, is the real propeller. We can call this Prakriti, is the real propeller of everything in this world. Beings are all puppets in her hands. The ignorant think that they are the doers, but they're not. And then another example Sri Ramakrishna gives of a small calf that is tethered to a post and given a large field to roam around in, and makes the mistake. I am free, I am free. No, you're not free. You only think you are. So this is now only covering a portion of what was intended. So I'll dive a little bit into something and we pick it up next week. Sorry. So how is the wise man established in inaction, and then the elucidation comes. Tyakta karma pala sangam nitya tripto nirashaha karmanya api pravditpi naiva kinchit karoti chaha. Having abandoned attachment to the fruits of action, in other words, all the results, ever content, depending on nothing, though engaged in karma. You don't say give up karma, engaged in karma. Truly, he does not do anything because he realizes, I am not the doer. An example is given again. Sri Ramakrishna gives this beautiful thing. In the story, the Bhagavatam, of Krishna with the gopis. And the gopis returning home once found no boatman to ferry them across the river Yamuna. Be not worried on this score, I shall lead you to the other bank. But give me something first to appease my hunger. So Vyasa asks this. So cream, butter, condensed milk were offered to him accordingly. And after doing full justice to the dainties, Vyasa stood up and implored, O Yamuna Devi, addressing the river, if it is a fact that I am fasting today, stop flowing and make way for us to get to the other bank. The river didn't stop flowing and the group did stop flowing. And the group safely walked to the opposite side. Now the gopis, who were perplexed, and they pleaded the sage to explain the anomaly. You said, if I'm fasting today, and look, you just feasted on our delicacies. So, please explain. You said that you had fasted, while actually you had feasted on the delicacies which they had supplied. Of course, there are two religious things you can do, feasting and fasting. Vyasa explained himself. The ceaseless hankering of my heart for Sri Krishna is my spiritual fasting. The idea I eat is not allowed to enter the mind. Your dishes were all offered as offerings to the Maker presiding over this body. In other words, my body is not mine. Even though we can use that phrase, it belongs to the Lord's body. So Maharshi Vyasa's life, in conformity with truth and his faith in the Almighty, worked this miracle. The yam stopped flowing. And then next week we can discuss the mental makeup of the yogi and explain how that works and how we the idea that we have to constantly think, I am not the doer of any action. It is the Lord that is doing everything. That's one way of looking at it. Another way is to say that I am the witness, knower, thinker, poised, and because of that presence, the universe moves and works and acts. In either case, I can be called, I am the doer of action. But I can also say, I am the non-doer of any action. When you understand this distinction, then you have mastered this whole question of karma, akarma. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace beyond all.